Hello, world. Welcome to the Speed Strength Show. I'm Tommy.
And I'm Braden. And you never stop clapping. The time between claps just gets longer or shorter.
Do you mean, maybe clarify for me a little bit here?
So like, I don't know, if you were at a show or something, then you applause after a song or after a performance or after the end of the whole thing, maybe, you know. And while you're applauding, it's very clear that you're clapping. Everyone knows and everyone would agree, but then maybe the clapping slows down. So the spaces are getting a little bit bigger and then you stop, but then you clap again later. So did you stop and start, or was that just a really big gap in claps? Because at what point is it a stop versus starting again versus a continuation?
I would say it stops and then it has
Okay.
to start again. So I would describe that as what do you call it? I'm thinking back now to the motor learning stuff where the different types of skills, the ones
Okay.
that are more continuous. I think it's like, is it continuous skill and discrete skills?
Yeah,
And
that sounds, yeah.
a
Yeah.
discrete skill has like a set start and finish. It's like flipping a light switch.
Mm,
The switch is
interesting.
down, then you go and you flick the switch, and then it's done.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to something like if you went out for a run, like yeah,
Each,
you have a start and a finish, but in between, when did you start your stride? When did you end your stride? Like it's a continuous
yeah.
kind of flowing skill. So to me, the clapping would start when there's sound, and then it would
Okay.
end when there's no sound.
So
Clapping could almost be thought of as like a song. It has a start and finish.
would you say then that each clap is an individual thing?
Oh, I see what you're saying now. You're looking at clapping as a continuous movement,
Well, that's what
like
I
a
was wondering. Like
repetitive.
if you're clapping, then maybe,
Oh,
you know,
this is this is more of a dilemma than I thought it was going to be.
so assuming that you were, I think a lot of people initially would be on that side where you clap for a minute and then you stop for an hour and then you clap for another minute. Those are two separate instances. But if I asked you, what if you decided to do one clap every hour for like a week? Are those, I don't know, what's 24 times 7? I'm not going to do the math. Is that like 300? Is that like 300
Is it
something?
148?
24 times 7? Oh yeah, it's probably in that range. It's in that range, I'd say.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't I didn't do so good at the math cards in grade 3. So,
Coming
um
back to haunt you now.
yeah. But yeah, is that so if that's 148, let's say, is that one clapping instance because it's a very continuous, interval, or is it 148 different times that you've decided to clap? Because then I would say like how long between claps becomes a stop and a restart.
Yeah, you may have created the ultimate like potato situation here,
Mm.
in the sense that I think you can argue both sides.
Hmm.
And I feel like for whatever reason, our perception of it is shaped by whatever we've experienced or biases we have or whatever. So I would tend to think of it as 148 individual claps,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't understand it because I don't see it that way, or
Mm.
I don't think of it that way, but I can understand why somebody would see it in a different light.
Mm.
As like you said, because it's this repeatable over time thing that it would be, they'd all be connected in some way.
Yeah, I mean, I could see people like, even if you take the time element out of it, versus like, I do think the argument, if you're using time as the argument, I feel like that's faulty because like, where is the transition between continuous and not? Um, but I could see people saying, like, if you're at a concert or whatever, you applause when the show's over and you're applauding, that was a great concert. I liked it. And then the next week you're at a sporting event and you applaud when your team wins and you're applauding that thing and you're no longer applauding the concert because that's over. So it's two different instances. But you could also, in my opinion, make the argument that you're applauding for joy or you're applauding for fun, and that never
It's
changes.
the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, I think of clapping as like a start and stop type thing.
Mm-hmm.
So like you said, someone comes up on the stage and they go, this is whoever, they're going to say some things. And you're like, oh yeah, applaud. Yeah. Thanks for being here. And then you stop. So there was a distinct, you started clapping for the person to come up on stage and you stopped clapping to let them speak and ramble about whatever they were going to talk about. And then when they were done, you start clapping again as they exit the stage and then you stop clapping. To me, those are two separate things.
Yeah.
Again, that's just the way I see it. I don't know why that is. I don't know why.
No, and it makes sense. It absolutely makes sense because you're like, it's two different. You're applauding for the same person, but it's two different actions. It's two different emotions potentially. It makes sense that, and I think a lot of people would agree with you. I don't think you're out of left field there on that one, but it just depends. Like with all these things, it just depends how you define it. And I feel like maybe I didn't look up the definition of clapping. So
I think it's just putting your hands together.
Yeah, I feel like it's going to be pretty narrow scope, but
it is interesting though, like, because I was thinking about it as like a start and stop thing, but as a skill, it might actually be viewed as a continuous skill in the same way that like cycling, running, rowing, other repetitive activities sort of have this like once you're in the movement, there's no clear start and finish to the movement.
yeah.
And so I could see clapping being one of those types of movements, because how do you it's this repeated action.
Yeah, I think usually that's actually an interesting point because I think, and again, I don't know how you would define it, but I think it's very easy to do. Like you can do one clap and that's fine. And I think everyone would understand that you did one clap.
Yeah.
But with things like walking and running and biking, especially running, I don't think you can really do one step. You can't do one running step because that's just a jump. That's like you just bounded, and people would look at you like, "What did you just do?" I have no idea.
And even with a step,
and it's a little bit.
Go ahead.
It's a little bit more clear with walking and biking, I think, but it's still muddy. Like it's because if you're walking and you're doing one walking step, that's not like step and then feet together, which everyone that's taking one step would do step, feet together. But that's not the continuous skill. That's a different thing.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was the thing I was going to bring up, that even if you looked at one step, like you said, someone comes back together with 2 feet. If you're walking continuously, you never come back together with the 2 feet until you're done walking. So that to me is the tricky part of this, is that clapping has a clear start and stop point.
Yeah.
But in between is kind of muddy. So I think that would be the reason why I could see somebody looking at it potentially in the different way from how I was looking at it. But to me, it has a start and stop, and they're distinct.
That's what it is. I think that's an important part of this argument, actually, because if that's the case, then you can do a fast clap and you can do a slow clap and you can do a slower clap, and that's why it works. But you can't, like, slow running isn't like a really long time between strides, so you can't make that argument that you're always running and you just are taking longer breaks between strides, because that's literally a lie. Like, that's not true at all. But with clapping you kind of could, because I don't know, it's interesting.
So yeah, that's my take on it.
Yeah, no, that's valuable.
There's no right or wrong with these, as we know.
Yeah,
but that's kind of how I've my getting surprised with the statement and not knowing what to expect. That's what I've come to my conclusion as.
No, that's valuable input though. I'm gonna, if I ever have an argument with somebody else about this in the future, I'll take that with me.
Just make sure you cite me.
Yeah, I will definitely
Reference personal communication with me.
Yeah, I don't want to
in
get
2021.
I don't want to get fined for plagiarism. So that's good. But speaking of starting something and then stopping something, and something being kind of continuous until you stop it, that's kind of along the lines of what we're talking about today, along the lines of what we talked about last week, which is plateaus. You're going steady in one direction, and then it feels at least like you've stopped. And last week it was more speed oriented, and this week it's going to be more strength oriented. Yeah. I wanted to start it off. I teased this to you a little bit at the beginning, like before we started recording, because we talked last time about the dilemma with sprinting related plateaus is that you can't keep doing the same stuff because that's what got you into the plateau, essentially. But you also can't stop doing the same stuff because speed is a very volatile attribute or adaptation. So it's kind of like where's the balance kind of a thing. And you illuminated that last week. So if anyone is not sure what we're talking about, go listen to it because it was a really good conversation. For me, it's definitely not the same kind of thing because strength lasts a lot longer than speed does. But for me, strength can be very task specific and very range of motion specific. And all of these different parameters, like there's a lot of different ways to vary the skill, and those variations will affect different people differently. So for me, if you're saying that you're in a plateau, that means that there's some sort of measurement that you're doing, that you're like, maybe you've tested a few different times and your testing numbers haven't gone up at all in the last 6 months or something like that, then you can say you're in a plateau. But that plateau is really only specific to that testing method. So for powerlifting, it's easy to talk about getting stronger and plateauing because everyone's talking about 1 rep max, squat, bench, deadlift. But if you're just a general fitness person, maybe you care about the 1 rep max, and then that's an easy benchmark. But maybe you care more about a 5 rep max or a 10 rep max. And that way, you can, if it is a 5 rep max, you can increase your 10, you can increase your 1, but your 5 might not go up. And if you're an athlete, it's even more, nebulous, I would say, because you're going to be doing thank you. You're going to be doing a lot of stuff in training and a lot of variation. And so, if your training is targeted towards being better at athletics in general, you're going to do a lot of variation, and maybe that'll carry over to the field. How do you do a field specific strength test? You can't really until your next season. And then the player comes back to you and says, I feel stronger now. So the stuff that we did last off season was good. Because if you gear all your training towards squatting, we're going to get better at a 3 rep max squat. That was one of our football strength tests that we did was a 3 rep max. Then, maybe the strength coach can say they got stronger because their 3 rep max squat went up. The 3 rep max squat went up, so they're better at squatting a 3 rep max. You can say that. You can't necessarily say that they're stronger as whatever their position is on the field or on the ice. You can't necessarily say that their play strength is stronger. It's a completely different thing, and they're correlated for sure, but they're not. It's a different thing.
Do you think that some of the underlying cause, specifically too with like if you're looking at max strength, do you think it is related to like overloading the nervous system or frying the nervous system? Because that's a little bit where the like that speed creates speed, but speed creates stagnation. Where if you're constantly just kind of like redlining the nervous system, you give it nowhere to go and you fry out the nervous system. And that's what kind of gets that plateau. Do you think there's a maybe the similarity with the strength stuff as well, especially on the heavier end? Maybe not a 10 RM, but if you get down to that 1 and 3 rep max, where just continually trying to push load in those low reps just fries the nervous system and leaves you nowhere to go. Do you think that's the case?
I think for a lot of people, especially like recreational gym goers, I would say that's the case. If they're experiencing a plateau, it's not necessarily that it's frying the nervous system, though that definitely could be part of it. It's more so for me anyway, that like there isn't any variation in loading. Like I think the mentality is very much like you need to do more each time. So if you went to the gym last week and you squatted 315 for one and it was really hard, then you've got it in your head that you've got to go and squat at least 320 this week. But last week was really hard, so this week's probably going to be really hard, and maybe you're not going to get it. And you're going to take your 315 and it's going to be really hard, and you're going to say that was maximal, so I'm not going to go up. And then you just like nothing ever changes because you just keep hitting the same thing maximally. And that happened to me when I was in high school. My bench had been going up consistently and I was maxing out every week and it was great. But then
Ridiculous. Just max out every week.
well, I mean, you're 19. What are you gonna
Yeah,
what
I
are you gonna
love it.
do?
I love it.
And I hit 295, I think was the heaviest. That was the most I ever benched in high school was 295. And I attempted 300 and 305 so many times. And I never got it in high school. Just because like you got to do something different at that point, you know. So I think that's the bigger cause. But frying the nervous system, frying the joints, just like overrunning your recovery capacity is a very real thing too. Um, so at one point, I think with strength stuff, it's something needs to change, and there's a lot of, as we just talked about before we started recording, there's a lot of things that can change. And intensity is one of them, frequency is one of them, tempo, like you can literally do a different exercise. There's so many things, different rep scheme, different number of sets. Like there's so many things that can change, and as long as something changes, I think you'll probably start to find your way out of that plateau. But how you get there is a little bit more specific to the person, I think, or what's going to work best is a little bit more specific to the person.
Yeah, because to me, maybe the interesting side of this is more on the maximal strength end, where you're really trying to push the intensity, and maybe that's just because it draws maybe more parallels to the last episode, where we don't want to change the speed work or the high velocity, change of direction stuff that we're doing in terms of like output or intensity, because the whole point is to move fast so we can develop that coordination and move fast. And so I'm wondering with sort of on the max strength side, do you think it's maybe a similar principle where we don't really want to pull back a whole lot on the intensity, but is there a way that we can manipulate some of the other components, whether it's like the position or the volume or other things like that, to keep the intensity and the load where it needs to be if we want to continue to develop high outputs, but still create a variation so that, again, we sort of have that middle of the Venn diagram. Like, what's the most important thing? We need to keep that there. But then we can change all these other things.
Yeah, I think, well, I think it depends on who you are and like where you are in your yearly phase. Because like we've talked about, strength doesn't go away that quickly. So if you're an athlete in the off season, you have time where you can work on max strength stuff, and then you can back away and build more of a base, do a little bit more volume at a lower intensity, focus on the technique a little bit more, do some more variation stuff, and build, like you talk about, like a wide base to a pyramid. And then so you can have a higher peak, which would be your max strength. Um, so if you have the time where you can afford to be a little bit weaker, then that's one option where you can pull back. And I would advise doing that at some point, at least. Like, you don't want to be operating at a 95% year round, I don't think. Um, but if you're in season, I listened to that podcast that Jay told us to listen to with Bobby Stroop. Um, he has his football guys doing the max, like maybe not maximal, but like high intensity strength stuff is very early in the week, every week, really, while
Well,
they're in
it's
season.
consistently in there.
Exactly. So,
Yeah,
and
and that's a
because it's,
little bit what I'm like alluding to here.
yeah, so, and because it's consistently in there, then they can handle that. And it's going to be very low volume, I'm sure. But the fact that it's in there means that that attribute stays. It doesn't really go away that much. But I think they're also not seeing very much progress, if any, while they're in season, you know? But yeah, I think with the max strength stuff, that's one consideration where in the off season, I think there's benefit to backing away at times and then pushing it at times. And you're going to see sort of that max strength kind of go up and down, but overall it's going up. Um, and then in season, it's going to be more like you keep that in um, to maintain it. But I think it still kind of comes back to um, even like what does maximal strength mean to you? Like, it's going to be a 1 rep max probably is the truest form of it. Um, but what's the exercise, or what are the exercises? Because with an athlete, you could very easily, I think, um, if they didn't have to test anything, like football players need to bench press because it's in their combine. So bench press should be in there the majority of the time, I think. But outside of that, you could have one maximal strength block that's focused on front squatting, one maximal strength block that's focused on back squatting, one maximal strength block that's focused on split squatting. And you could just you could cycle those, or you could work in more exercises. Um, and I think it all kind of gets you to the same spot, more or less. Um, and if you're doing it that way, then there's going to be a little bit of reduction in intensity and recovery to the nervous system because there's like a small learning window. Um, yeah, I don't know if I answered your question or not. I kind of talked around a lot.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point you bring up about like this example of the squat, right? Where you do back squat, you do front squat, and you do split squat. Like, are those different, or are they like too different potentially to contribute one to the other? Or
Well, and that's the thing is, like, do you care?
yeah,
That
and that
that's
would,
that's
yeah,
like
for an athlete in a
that's the
different sport, who
whole
cares?
dilemma, right? Like, if we're talking about powerlifting, which is where most of my experience is, I'm not going to get nearly like, we'll do split squats, but it's never going to be a main thing. We'll
It's always an
do
accessory,
we'll
auxiliary
do
type thing to the.
dumbbell. Yeah, exactly. We'll do dumbbell bench, but it's never going to be a main thing. Like, things like that. Um, and the competition movement is going to stay in the program every week, like 95% of the time, at least. Um, but also 95% of the time, there's going to be some variation in there, a different kind of, so if somebody's squatting twice a week, there's going to be the comp day squat, which most of the time is not going to be maximal. It's going to be maybe one hard set followed by easier back down sets because, we care about recovery. And once you're that deep into an attribute, like, there is no strong enough for a power lifter. The stronger you can be, the better you are at your sport, which is not the case for an athlete, right? Um, Once you're that deep into it, like, you can't do 4 sets to a 9 RPE. Like, you're going to destroy yourself. Probably, it depends on where you are in the level of your sport, but athletes, a lot, like, I did that when I was an athlete, and like, I can't do that stuff anymore because, or when I was training strength powerlifting more consistently, I couldn't do that stuff because it would destroy me. Um, So yeah, it's going to be like one hard set probably followed by easier back down sets, which is going to make it easier for recovery and easier for refining the movement pattern, which matters a lot. And then the second squat day in the week is probably going to be a variation, which is going to address whatever weaknesses I see in their squat. So it's different, which is good because that's going to it's something new for the nervous system to adapt to and learn and build a wider squat pattern, if you want to talk about that. And it's also targeting a specific thing that this person needs to work on. So if you want it to carry over to a specific movement, then you can do that, and you just have to stay within that movement, generally speaking. And some people, like, you'll see stuff on Instagram about people doing, or I see stuff anyway, a cambered bar squat with chains and bands and reverse bands to a box with a wide stance. Like, that's so different from your competition movement. Is that, like, there's going to be some carryover because it is a squat, but like the loading's not the same, the stance isn't the same, the range of motion isn't the same, the top to bottom pattern isn't the same because you're sitting back to the box. Like, there's so many things that have changed now.
It's too much variation.
Exactly. That would be my argument anyway. But if you do a competition stance paused squat, the only thing that's different about the movement is the tempo. That's it. So it's a lot closer, but it's still different enough that your nervous system is going to recognize it as something different. So it's a tricky thing with athletes, I think, because you want to have some measure to know that the off-season stuff you did worked. But training for the testing versus training for the sport are different things.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up some good points with like the variation, and if I think of like team sports or evasion sports, open sports where things are like less predictable, I think you are right that if you're doing front squat and a block, and then you're doing some back squat or changing things up, it if anything that might be better for the athlete because they're going to be in different positions. They're going to have to produce force in different ways potentially based on the randomness of their environment. But then if I look on the other side where you look in individual sport, cycling, rowing, swimming, track, other things like that, where it's a pretty repetitive movement pattern, but then also this idea of pushing the envelope on the abilities or the qualities that you have becomes really important, right? So if you think about someone like a football player, rugby player, soccer player, they're in all kinds of different positions all the time. So I think that variation helps. But if you're an athlete who's doing the repetitive movement, does that variation then allow you to truly overload the movement to a point where you're reaching this like brand new ceiling? So I feel like some of the individual sports maybe fall in a middle ground between powerlifting, for example, where, like you said, you can never be strong enough because the stronger you get, you better are at the sport. It's not necessarily true in track and swimming and rowing and other things like that. There is a point where you are strong enough, but it doesn't require nearly the level of variation as other team sports. So that would be kind of a curious. That's where I think maybe for individual sports there could be a lot of potential things that we could draw on from the variation that you might use for powerlifting, because we may not want to radically change the strength movement. We may just want to introduce a bit of a change, help bump that plateau upwards and moving up again, and then ride that wave.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And that's something, like, even with open sport athletes, I go back and forth on it, because you can make the argument that if you're focusing on like a narrower scope of exercises, that you become better at those exercises. And even though the variation is something that's good for an athlete, the output is something that's also good for the athlete. So if you spend more time getting better at a few things, then you can get more out of each exercise, but you have less tools in your toolbox in a way. But yes, with those individual sports where the environment is very, very predictable, then I would definitely agree that staying focused to whatever this, and it can be different. Like obviously it doesn't have to be squatting for a cyclist or a cycling, like maybe it would be squatting. For swimming it would probably be something different.
I was just pulling squat as an example, but you're right. It could be
Yeah, it would be
any
something that
movement.
you care about anyway. That if you work with that sport and you see them in this kind of a position a lot, then they should be strong in that position. That's great. Um, or if it's just general power, then you pick some random general power exercise or general lower body strength exercise out of a hat, and that's fine. But yeah, I do think there's a lot of benefit to pushing the envelope in this one specific exercise for the output. Like you get more out of it. Um, and yeah, picking some variations that just for the sake of being different, for the sake of health, you know, um, and if I wouldn't be upset at all with like a swimmer if they wanted to squat, that they pulled some like powerlifting-esque style squat program, because they were, you know, they getting stronger is going to help this person. So, they want to squat and then they see this weakness in their squat and then they've plateaued. Then they want to do this specific variation to address their weakness, and then they can keep loading up the weight. Um, and there is a point where they get strong enough. So then I don't think you would focus on it that much, but I still think the same principle would apply, where you would then have a few power movements that you like and a few speed movements that you like, that you're going to push the envelope on those and introduce variation to influence those. And I think it's the same. The attribute changes, but the mindset stays the same probably, versus it with an open sport. We just talked about like you want to do like anything you can think of, you probably want to do it because it'll be good for this open sport athlete to handle these types of forces and loads and positions.
What are some of your like maybe go-tos in terms of variations or ways? So if you had somebody who, yeah, I don't want to take bench out of the program, I don't want to take squatting out of the program or a particular strength movement, what do you think are some of the best ways, or what ways have you had the most success with creating variation to break through whatever kind of sticking point someone's at in terms of their output?
Well, if we're talking about exercises, then it would address whatever specific weaknesses they have, and for that, I tend to look, where are they struggling? Like, where is the bar slowing down the most generally, or where does it start to slow down? And what kind of positions do they move into when that's happening? And that can tell you like what muscles are doing more or less work. Um, and we've talked about some of this stuff in the exercise selection episodes and the assessment episodes earlier on. But an easy one for the squat is hips shoot back, chest falls, and the good morning squat, right? So that's going to tell you maybe that they're not, like they're just not comfortable in the bottom position, and maybe it's more of like a mental thing. So then in that situation, you'd want to dial back the weight and get them comfortable in that position. Um, Most likely, it's probably their quads are just really weak, so they're shifting back into a stronger position. So you'd want to do a lot of like high bar squats, front squats. I like pause squats, but you've got to coach them a little bit more specifically to avoid that pattern. I like pin squats a lot for more of the technical side of thing, because it's if you shift back really early off a pin squat, it feels terrible. Um, and then a lot of accessories to build up the quads. Um, you see a similar kind of thing in the deadlift where they get into a good position and then they shift hips back, hips up kind of thing, which could be a quad weakness. It could just be they're not used to being patient off the floor. Um, so if it's a patience thing, then I'd vary the tempo or I'd add a pause off the floor or something like that. If their quads are weak, then I'd probably get them to do deficits or like a longer pause, maybe just to hold that low position, and then same sort of quad focused accessories. Um, and then with the bench press, yeah, if they're struggling off their chest, then longer pauses and pins and things like that that emphasize the low position, and a lot of pec focused accessories. And if it's a lockout thing, then it's going to be more triceps focused accessories, smaller range of motion like block stuff or higher pin stuff. That's going to emphasize the top part of the range where the triceps are doing the work. Um, the tricky thing that I think a lot of people that are new to powerlifting get wrong, in my opinion, especially if you are a conventional deadlifter and you struggle at lockout. Everybody who's a conventional deadlifter struggles at lockout because it's a lot harder to get off the floor in a good position in conventional compared to sumo, just because you're already in a more bent over position. You're already asking your hips to do so much more work than your knee extensors. So the way that your body compensates to make it easier for you is rounds the back to get the hips closer to the bar, so it's a shorter lever arm. And so a lot of these people will do like high rack pulls and high block pulls and things like that, because like, oh man, I'm so weak at lockout, I gotta like really strengthen this lockout position. But that's not your problem. Your problem is you can't get off the floor in a good position. If you could get off your floor in a good position, then your back would stay straight, your hips and your glutes and hamstrings would have a good leverage to extend the hips, but they don't. They're fully extended and the bar still at your knees, and you're just relying on your erectors to pull you upright. So at that point, you're strengthening the range, but not the position, because you're going to set up with a perfectly flat back for your block pulls and your rack pulls. So it's not doing the thing that you want it to be doing. But that's kind of a general basic overview for those three anyway. And obviously I'm not an expert on split squats or overhead press, things like that, but you would find similar compensations and things like that in those movements, I'm sure. And I see that from time to time too. I just don't spend a lot of time with it.
Yeah, but so really, if you can, like, if you're dealing with these strength movements and you change, like you said, potentially the starting position, or you throw variations in with the tempo or other things like that, that's enough to create a potential change to help you get through a plateau. Because I think that's the big thing for, like, if anyone is working with somebody and they're stuck, then like how much action do you actually need to take, and can a small change like that actually result in a positive adaptation to help you move forward?
Yeah, definitely it does. I would say if you care about squatting, then keep the squat 100% the same except for one part of it. Change one thing about the movement, that is. So you change the tempo, that's one thing. You add a pause, that's one thing. You add some kind of exterior constraint like bands or chains or pins, things like that. You change your stance, that's one thing. Yeah, lots of different stuff that you can change. Bar position is another one. So yeah, lots of things you can change, but in my experience, if you change one, that's enough, and it will carry over. Now, if you do this deadlift thing where you round your back off the floor and you say you're really weak at lockout, and you do a lot of like high pin rack pulls, then that is one thing, in my opinion. You're changing the range of motion, but you're getting stronger at something that is not the problem. That's not that. It will carry over, but that's not your issue. So the change you're going to see is very, very minimal, in my opinion.
Like, obviously that matters a lot in powerlifting, because the load that's moved is a direct result in terms of your competition and how well you place. Do you think maybe something like that is like a slightly less important for athletes in other sports, where as long as it does help bump you through whatever plateau, like would you argue it's maybe less important?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's less important, but I'm also kind of thinking like it maybe wouldn't, like it might bump you through the plateau, but I think the chances of that happening are less likely. I think somebody in that position, if they were to add a deficit, mind you, keeping a good position in the deficit, not letting yourself round
Correct.
immediately out of that, or like a pause deadlift, I think those would be, they would have a larger effect in my opinion. Um, but yeah, there's lots of stuff. Like, I mean, I think people that are especially like newer people in the gym, when they hit their plateau, I feel like maybe it's because they have too much variation in their program and they're doing different stuff every time they go to the gym, different stuff every week, and you don't give yourself enough time to adapt to whatever stimulus. So you're just kind of always cycling and you're never able to push because you don't give your time to get better at anything. So in that situation, you want to be more consistent, probably. Um, and I mean, what you spoke about earlier with the nervous system, um, or joints or what, like there's so many things that can be fatigued. Um, there is a point where you're doing too much, and I've experienced that with my powerlifters too, where um, they're, even with the variation, and we're changing the rep scheme and we're changing the variations that we're doing, and we're working on technique stuff, all that sort of thing. um, and it seems like progress isn't happening, or at least isn't happening the way we would expect it to, or maybe um, you make some progress and then you get hurt, and then you rehab, make progress, get hurt, that kind of thing. Then you want to be doing less work, or like frequency is usually the first thing that I'll take down. So if someone's squatting 3 times and they're having squat related injuries, then we're going to start squatting 2 times a week instead of 3. If someone's benching 4 times and having bench related injuries, then we'll drop down to 3 times a week benching. And that works pretty well. And same kind of thing in the other direction. Like if someone's not making progress, but they feel really fresh and good, and like they feel 100% recovered, and their sleep's good and their nutrition's good and their hydration's good, then maybe you need to add a bench day or add a squat day, or at the very least, if you're doing, like a lot of people are doing like 1 or 2 hard sets a week, then maybe you need to do 4 or 5 hard sets a week. Maybe that's going to be the thing that pushes you. And I've had a lot of success with modulating that stuff as well.
Well, that's another variation, essentially, right? Or another
Yeah.
way to change the stimulus, change the load that you're putting on the athlete, right?
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
adding
Like,
another day or subtracting a day or anything like that. So,
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, again, it's another tool in the toolbox
yeah,
you can
yeah.
use.
Change the rep scheme, change the loading scheme. Like, yeah, you can do top set with back down sets. You can do straight sets. You can do pyramid sets. You can do ramping sets. You can do rep out sets. I mean, I get some of my athletes to do rep out sets. Usually it's just bench because that's really easy, but yeah, sometimes. So sometimes that's what you need to do.
Yeah, and to me, what I like about some of those things is that it's a way to keep, again, maybe the exercise or the root movement that you're doing kind of the same, but then still being able to introduce this variation, this challenge to that movement, and you're not just doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. There is some, I guess I would describe it as a challenge that the body has to deal with and overcome in order to be stronger at that movement.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think and you can kind of go like step by step. Like if somebody's new to the gym, um, I feel like it's 1 or 2 ways that they jump into the gym and they try literally everything, and then they're bouncing around all the time. So, and obviously in that situation, you want to do some more consistent stuff. Or the other situation is when someone has like one workout that they do, and they do that every single day, or they have one weekly training thing that they do every single week, and they just never change it, and eventually it stops, right? It has to stop, but they keep cycling. And you see that with like some internet programs are like that, where you just do this all the time until it stops. um, and then if that's the case, then like maybe your program has you squatting twice a week and it's the same squat day, then I think the first change you make is just change the reps. Like one day you can keep the same, and then the other day, like if you're doing fives before, do sevens instead, or do threes. And now you've got 2 different squat days. And once that stops working, then you can, increase the volume. You can change both rep schemes. Like it doesn't need to be huge changes, and it's only like when you get down the line, you need to change the exercise. You need to add like top sets and back down sets. You need to add rep out sets. You need to, you know, then you need to be changing more things to stay ahead of the nervous system. But when you're starting, like it's just one little tweak, and you'll see things coming back up.
Yeah, it doesn't take much in the beginning to kind of spark some sort of a change, because people do respond very quickly and very well for the first time when they're doing stuff.
Yeah, and at that point, it doesn't matter what the change is. Like literally anything that's different will be fine.
Yeah, I mean, and that's an interesting point too, because for someone who's, maybe that person who's learning to lift or is getting into it for the first time is maybe similar to more of those team sport athletes, the open sport athlete, where the variation is potentially going to be good because they can learn a whole bunch of different movements and build that foundation moving forward. As long as, like you said, the variation is not every time I go into the gym, I do something different and there's no consistency to what you're doing. But you run a block of something and then you do something a little bit different and then you do something different after that. And you expose yourself to all the different types of squatting or hinging or pressing or pulling movements that there kind of are available.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're just starting out, like I don't think there's nothing crazy wrong with doing different stuff every day. Eventually, you're going to hit a plateau where you need to be more consistent, but like you say, it's beneficial for newer lifters to try a lot of different stuff and build like a wide base to the pyramid and a wide, like what constitutes a squat. Having a wide variety of things that could be squats is beneficial. And if you want to specialize later, then you can. For powerlifters, being a little bit more specialized is helpful, but things happen at heavy weights where you shift one way and then all of a sudden you're outside of your pattern. So what are you going to do about it? Right. But with someone who's just starting out, you don't need to worry about that. And it just helps you feel more different positions, you feel more different cues and muscle tensions and force angles and all those different things. So it also allows you to learn movements faster, I think, if you have more variation. And to change your technique faster. If you can, the more different stuff you do, the more you can feel your body, the more you can vary what you're doing in space. So someone that's coming from a sport background maybe would be better off being a little bit more consistent off the start because they've already had all that variation and like body control and stuff like that. So they know what they're doing generally, so they can be a little bit more specific. But someone who's never played a sport, never played an instrument, and then has been working in an office job for 10 years, be careful when you go to the gym and don't throw around crazy weights. But I think it would be good for that person to try a different exercise every single time they went to the gym.
Yeah, like you said, just do something a little bit different to kind of, just explore things. Because like you said, they haven't really done that before. So they don't know where maybe they're strong, where they're weak, what they like to do, what they don't like to do. Like they have no idea because they've never been in there before compared to people that have some sort of experience. There's some sort of a starting point you can go from.
Yeah. I mean, that's another really good point too. Like if you're just starting out, you don't know what you like to do. So try different stuff and see what you like. And that's actually another really good thing that I think is helpful for breaking through plateaus from two perspectives. One, I think if there's something that you really want to be doing, whether it's like a specific rep scheme or a specific variation that you're excited to do or excited to try, chances are that's probably going to be a good thing for you to do. In my opinion, anyway.
The intent is probably better
Yeah.
in that, because you actually want to do it. It's not something that is being imposed against your will on you.
Well, exactly. And I think that there could be some sort of and it depends how you view the world, I think, but some sort of instinctual or some sort of spiritual or some sort of like, I don't know, there's something inside you is telling you that's the thing you need to be doing, you know? And as a coach, if I have a really good reason to say this isn't going to work for these reasons, then the answer is no. But if I don't have a really good reason for that, I mean, why not? What's the harm? But it's important for you to enjoy your training, regardless of if it's something that's really like overpowering, instinctual. I want to do squat sets of 3, then you can do that. But you need to be enjoying your training, and that doesn't mean that you max out every week, because maxing out's fun. That's not going to get you there. But you need to be doing the training that you like, and I think if you are competing in powerlifting and you're good at powerlifting, but you don't like powerlifting training, you're probably not going to make very much progress. So it would be more beneficial for you to train in a style that works better for you. And I think, I mean, you'll have more progress doing it that way, even if it's not as optimal scientifically. And the other thing that I wanted to touch on is the mindset side of it and the self-talk side of it. And I don't know if you experienced this in working with sport athletes or with track people, but it definitely is a thing in the bench press, or sorry, in the powerlifting community, where everyone is good at 1, maybe 2 lifts, and everyone is terrible at 1, maybe 2 lifts. And the one that you're good at typically is going to go up faster than the 2 that you're bad at, because you have a better relationship with that lift. You feel more confident in that lift. You feel more excited to go to the gym on those days. And then, I think for a lot of people, they're really good at deadlifting and they're okay at squatting and they're terrible at bench. So all the time they're excited to go deadlift. They're like, I'm really good at deadlifting. I'm really confident this is going to be a great session. And then it's bench day. Well, I guess we'll just try to get through it. Or I'm shit at bench, so this is no wonder it's terrible. I'm shit at bench, so it's fine. And like, you can't expect yourself to make progress if you're telling yourself that you're terrible at it. And being terrible and failing sets and having bad technique is all expected because you're terrible. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So I think fixing that side of it and finding a way to be excited about bench press and finding a way to feel good about your bench press or whatever exercise, it's important to find things that you are confident in, and reasons why even if it's not the number, like maybe you just have really good technique. There's so many things that you can feel good about. And once you start feeling good about it, and once you start saying like, I am a good bench presser, I'm going to get better at bench press, then you will, because like you say, I mean, you can explain it in a lot of ways. The intent is part of it. The output is going to be part of it. And, and I think there's a spiritual impact as well. Not everyone's going to agree with that, but there is an effect and you can't disagree with that.
Well, like you said, there's a level that, like, confidence wise, if you're not confident, you're not going to, you need to commit to the bar or the dumbbell or whatever it is that you're moving. You need to commit to it. There's no way that you can move a heavy load or produce this level of output if you don't have the confidence, because you've already given up on it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't, cop out halfway through a rep. And so I do agree that the confidence piece is a huge component of it, because if you're confident that you can get under the bar or whatever the load is and move it, your chances of success are definitely higher. And I think that's where maybe a potential tool with the variation comes into play, where, like you said, someone doesn't like a particular movement or they're not confident with a particular movement. You might be able to change that movement in some way, shape, or form through the things that you talked about to make it a more confident movement, where all of a sudden, yeah, I like this a little bit better, or I feel pretty confident with this. And now you use that to help break through the plateau in a squat or bench or row or pull up or whatever movement that you're doing, you can use that variation to establish confidence coming back into the movement and then try to help the person that way. So I
Yeah.
do agree that there's a place for variation to impact that.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Yeah, I don't think anybody should be attempting to lift something they're not confident that they can lift. Personally, unless
Out of reason. If you can only
yeah,
squat 300 pounds, don't put 400 pounds on the bar and expect to move it.
well, exactly. But even if it is something that's within your wheelhouse, like if you are a 300-pound squatter and it's testing day and 300 just moved really good, and it looks like 315 is going to be there, and you want 315 because that means so much to you, but you're afraid and you're not confident you can do it, then like maybe you'll get it, maybe. But I feel like the chances are a lot lower. And like number one is be confident, but I don't think, I think it's tricky, but I don't think there's a lot of merit to attempting things that you expect to fail, regardless of if it looks like you should fail or not.
Yeah,
You know,
I agree with you completely.
but I agree with the variation piece because like you can put them in a slightly different position that mimics, what they're going to be in, but maybe feels a little bit more comfortable or whatever. But another big part of it, I think, especially for athletes, is there's not the same emotional attachment, especially because people are going to respond differently to different variations where like a 500-pound squatter might, their max pause squat might be 400, but somebody else who squats 500, their max pause squat might be 485, like it. And because of that, there's not going to be as much emotional attachment, especially if you're doing it for the first time, because you don't know where you're going to be. And I liked that. I don't remember which episode it was, but you talked about in training for sprinters doing 110s or 90s. And people will run better in over like a 110-meter or over a 90-meter or whatever, because it's not their competition distance. So they don't,
Well, you can detach the
yeah,
result from it.
they don't know what a good 110-meter time is. Right.
Exactly. Yeah,
And
you put them in an off distance and you just tell them, just go. And they have
exactly.
no expectation for what should I run 135 meters in. They don't know because they've never been timed in that.
Exactly. And so with, with this a competition squat, set of two, that's very close to what you do in competition. You do that sort of thing quite regularly. You know exactly what it feels like. You know roughly where you should be in that range. So if you go into a session and things are feeling heavier than they should, then now you're nervous. But if it's a tempo squat or a pause squat and you've never done this specific variation before, then who cares? Because I mean, maybe things are heavy today. Maybe you're just not good at this variation, and that's fine. Or, whatever. There's lots of things, but yeah, lots of things you can change with strength stuff that have an impact.
That's good stuff, though. I mean, like I said, it gives somewhere for people to go, because inevitably, if you continue training, whether that's in the weight room for your sport, whatever, you're going to run into some kind of sticking point, some sort of plateau. And so being able to break through that or move past it is important. And
Yeah.
so to me, giving people the tools to do that is beneficial. So
Yeah. I would say the biggest things to think about are mindset, variation, and recovery are the three biggest things. And if you're recovering more, like if you feel amazing, then you can do more and you should do more. If you feel run down and tired and hurt, then you should do less. And there's lots of ways that you can do more or do less, whether it be, reps, volume, frequency, intensity, lots of things. But those would be the three biggest things. And if you can vary them in a way that is more exciting to you or fits how you move, then you'll get a better output probably. So yeah, that's what I would say.
that's solid.
Mhm.
Solid. You could also argue that, I know you know where I'm going with this. See
Yeah,
the
I
smile
do.
on your face. You're like, yeah,
Uh-huh.
this is where he's going.
I like it.
We've used this a million times before, but music can change the output. Maybe it changes your mood. Maybe it changes, the atmosphere of where you are. But sometimes the music changes the output. So what did
Um,
you have? What did you have going
well,
this week?
before I get into it, I want to say one more thing because I watched a video this morning actually, and they talked about the environment, and it's related to mindset. It's related to confidence and all those sorts of things. But that might be something helpful as well. If you're experiencing a plateau at Good Life, find a gym that suits your training style or needs or environment or whatever. Like if you're a sprinter and you're working out a Good Life, find a sprinting gym. If you're an athlete, find a gym that trains athletes. If you're a powerlifter, find a powerlifting gym. And when you align yourself with people that are like-minded, you'll get better ideas of how to change your training, and B, it's just going to be so much more fun because nobody likes training Good Life. So don't do it. Even if you're bodybuilding, there's bodybuilding gyms. So anyway.
So number one takeaway: don't lift a Good Life ever.
Yeah. But yes, I have definitely experienced increased output from the music choice. I have my PR song that I will play every time I'm trying to PR, and I never listen to it outside of that time, and it's amazing. But this week I did not listen to that because I did not hit any PRs this week. I was listening to Billie Eilish, which was really nice actually. I've not really given her a chance before. I've heard some stuff that she has on the radio, and it's been like, ooh, I don't like that. And then later I hear it's like, that's actually pretty good. And now I think pretty much all of her stuff's good. It's a very interesting. Some stuff is very, it feels ethereal to me.
Oh, it's another big word.
Yeah.
Braden 2, Tommy 0 for big words today.
And then I feel like she has like half her songs are that sort of like wispy, ethereal, like spiritual feeling. And then the other half of her song is very like feels to me like dark and sinister. And it's not like, I don't know, it's not like dark and sinister in the way that metal can be, like where it's like violent and things like that. It's just like emotionally, I don't know the right way to describe it, but that's how it feels to me. And it's interesting. I like it.
I don't think I've ever heard a song by her. I probably have, and maybe I would recognize something if it's been on the radio.
I'm sure you have, yeah.
But I don't think I can name I can't name a single tune.
Have you heard the song "Bad Guy"? You're a bad guy.
You gonna sing it for us?
I'm definitely not going to sing it.
Because then I have no idea what it is.
She kind of like whispers when she sings, which is interesting.
I can look up a few tunes and then I can tell you if I've heard like the most popular ones and be like, oh yeah, I've heard that, or I haven't. Because nothing like is coming right off the top of my head where I'm like, oh yeah, that song or this song.
Yeah.
I think I'd have to listen and then see if I recognize it. If of course you're not gonna sing it for me.
I'm definitely not going to sing it to you,
Okay.
but I can send you the one that I'll send you "Bad Guy." I'm sure you've heard that one. So
I guess we'll find out.
yeah. Yeah. What were you listening to this week?
Man, I was diving into some more of the obviously EDM. Like by now people should know I like my EDM music.
Mhm.
And I can't believe it's been so long since I've listened to Martin Garrix and Tiesto.
Those
Two
are
of the
names
best
that I know.
DJs of all time.
Yeah.
Both Dutch. The Dutch have a lot of really good EDM DJs out there. So yeah, I was blasting a lot of Martin Garrix, a lot of Tiesto.
Nice.
Martin Garrix obviously hasn't been in the game as long. He's quite young.
Sure.
But Tiesto is like the grandfather of EDM. Like he's produced all kinds of stuff over the last couple decades. So, and it's cool. They collaborate on some stuff. So yeah, just feel good, kind of vibe in music.
Nice.
Sometimes there's
like that
words,
stuff.
sometimes there's not, but it's always high energy, which I like.
I like that stuff.
So
Do you have a favorite EDM artist slash DJ, or not really? I feel like you don't pick favorites ever. It's just like flavor of the week kind of thing.
No, but those two might be up there.
Hmm.
And I'm pretty sure the first EDM song that I heard where I was like, man, that's really, really good. I
Hmm.
like this. It would be a toss up between like Tiesto and Daft Punk. Again, probably like two people that have been doing it for quite some time,
Hmm.
but they're definitely up there. The two of them, they got so many good tunes.
Do they have more of like a like their newer stuff? Do they have more of like an old school feel still? Like, do they keep the style similar, or is it evolving with what the younger people are doing too?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't really
I'm not
know. I
I'm
don't
not a
really know
musical
enough
guy.
about the music
Okay, I don't
to
either.
like. I just hear it. I'm like, yo, this is good.
Yeah,
As where with
that's
like
fair.
other stuff with like maybe the metal, because I do play some of the instruments that they use, then I can kind of hear, oh, okay, they're doing this and that's different, or they're
Mm,
doing that, so I can get a bit better of a sense. But for the EDM, I just listen to it. I'm like, yo, this is good. All right, remember that. Keep
nice,
playing it.
nice, true,
But yeah,
good
so
stuff.
good stuff this week.
Yeah, yeah, very good, very good. Yeah, that was a good talk. I liked it.
It was fun.
I feel like there's some good stuff in there.
Yeah, don't go to Good Life.
Yeah, that's the key takeaway. Last week we learned run in circles slash on a curve, and then today we learned don't go to good life. Um, but yeah, if anyone wants us to talk about anything specific or uh, is very, you know, confident in their good life membership, then let us know on Instagram. Speed Strength Show, Speed Strength Performance, Braden Southern, and yeah. Otherwise, that was the Speed Strength Show.
We will see you next week.
Peace.